The night it all began felt ordinary at first, too ordinary for a moment, that would end up carving itself into my bones forever. The house smelled of spices and warm bread, the kind of scent that usually meant comfort. But that evening something felt off, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for my world to crack. I walked into the dining room with excitement lodged in my chest. For weeks I had been working silently, struggling, dreaming, and praying for one chance, just one, to make my parents proud. And finally it had happened. I had been selected for a national program that thousands had applied to, and only a handful had achieved. In my heart, I believed this moment would change everything. My mother placed plates on the table without looking at me. My father sat scrolling through his phone, his forehead creased in irritation even before I said a word. Still, I swallowed my fear and sat down. For a moment, all you could hear was the clinking of spoons and the humming of the refrigerator. I cleared my throat quietly. I have something to tell you," I said, trying to hide the tremble in my voice. Neither of them looked up. I got selected. I continued softly, for the national program. It's a really big achievement. They only choose. Before I could finish, my father finally raised his eyes. But there was no pride in them, no warmth, only exhaustion and something colder. "Nobody needs you to do anything big," he said flatly. "Nobody needs you at all." His words landed like a punch I never saw coming. My mother didn't even hesitate. "You think this makes you special? You're not. You've always been a burden, taking space, wasting time." The spoon slipped from my fingers. I felt my throat tighten, the air leaving my lungs. I had imagined many reactions: confusion, surprise, maybe even the smallest smile, but never this. Never pure rejection. Never dismissal so sharp it felt like it could tear skin. I stared at them, my heart beat loud in my ears. But crying would have made me look weak. Speaking would have made me look desperate. So instead, I did the only thing left to do. I smiled, a small broken smile that stretched across my face even as something inside me collapsed. They didn't notice the crack. They didn't notice anything at all. "Oh," I whispered, "okay." And just like that, dinner continued. They talked to each other, not to me. Laughed at jokes I wasn't part of. Ate food I suddenly couldn't taste. By the time the plates were empty, I already knew. I was done looking for love in a house that had none for me. That night, everything changed. The night I left home, the world outside felt strangely quiet, like even the sky was watching me walk away. I didn't take much. Just a small bag with 2 shirts, a notebook, and my acceptance letter, the one they didn't care to hear about. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. They hadn't listened to my voice at dinner. They wouldn't notice its silence now. For the first hour, I walked aimlessly, letting the cold wind numb the sting in my chest. My parents' words replayed again and again. "Nobody needs you." I repeated them until they transformed from pain into fuel. By midnight, I found myself at a bus station. I boarded the first cheap ride I could find. No destination, just distance. I sat by the window, watching the familiar city shrink behind me. It felt like watching a version of myself die, one that had begged for love that never came. When the bus stopped in another city, everything hit me at once. I was truly alone. No home, no money, no family waiting. But I reminded myself, being alone was still better than being unwanted. The first week was the hardest. I slept on benches using my bag as a pillow. Some nights I stayed in 24-hour libraries, pretending to study just to avoid the cold. I ate little, sometimes nothing, but every time I felt like giving up, I remembered my father's voice dripping with disappointment, and I forced myself forward. Eventually, I found a job clearing tables at a small roadside cafe. The pay was low, the hours long, but the owner didn't ask questions, and that was enough. I saved every rupee I could. In the mornings, before my shift, I used the cafe's Wi-Fi to learn skills, apply for scholarships, and work on projects. I studied like my life depended on it, because it did. People came and went from the cafe every day, but nobody knew my story. Nobody knew the boy who wiped their tables, had walked out of his own home with nothing but a broken heart and a stubborn dream. And honestly, I liked it that way. I was free from their judgments, free from their eyes, free to rebuild myself from scratch. Weeks turned to months. Slowly, opportunities began opening. A mentor noticed my work online. A scholarship interview went better than expected. My projects gained recognition. I was no longer the invisible boy sitting quietly at a dinner table. I was becoming someone I never knew I could be. But even as life started taking shape, one thought stayed with me. One day, they will see who I became without them. And on that day, the son they didn't need would become the man the world couldn't ignore. Years passed like chapters in a book I never planned to write. The boy who had walked away with trembling hands and a shattered heart had slowly transformed into a man people respected, someone who spoke at conferences, someone whose work reached places his parents never believed he could even dream of. But life has a strange way of circling back. It began with a phone call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. A hesitant voice on the other end whispered my father's name, followed by words that froze me in place. Your parents, they're in trouble. Trouble was an understatement. Their business had collapsed, their savings drained, and the cold relatives they once trusted had turned their backs. Suddenly, the people who once believed nobody needed me now had no one left to rely on. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I simply bought a ticket home. The city looked smaller when I returned, as if time had been unkind to both the streets and the memories. I stood in front of the house I once called mine. The paint was peeling, the gate crooked, the windows dim like tired eyes. When I knocked, the door opened slowly. My mother stood there, thinner than I remembered, her hair streaked with gray. For a moment she just stared. She didn't recognize me. Not the confident posture, not the calm expression, not the man I had become. But then her breath hitched. Adel, she whispered, voice cracking like old porcelain. My father came hobbling behind her. Age had carved deep lines into his face. When his eyes met mine, he froze, completely shock, guilt, and 1,000 unsaid words flickering in a single heartbeat. You came back, he said quietly, almost unbelieving. I looked at them, emotions swirling but controlled. I heard you needed help. Their faces shifted hope, desperation, a flicker of shame. Inside, the house felt unfamiliar. Dark, cold, like a place abandoned by both joy and pride. They told me everything, how the business fell apart, how debts piled up, how illness struck, how the people they trusted disappeared. We didn't know who else to call. My mother said, clutching her hands tightly, we thought maybe you still cared. Her voice trembled, eyes searching mine for the son she had once dismissed like nothing. I sat quietly, letting their words settle. The boy inside me remembered every insult, every dismissal, every night spent alone because they chose silence over love. But the man I had become refused to let anger guide him. You're different. My father murmured, stronger, successful. We barely recognize you. I barely recognize you too. I replied softly, not with bitterness, just truth. And in that moment, they finally understood. The son they once overlooked had returned as someone they could no longer ignore. Helping them wasn't the hard part. Feeling anything while doing it was. The next morning, I sat at their old dining table, the same place where years ago they told me nobody needed me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Back then, their words had cut through me like glass. Now, sitting in the same chair, I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, just distance. They explained their debts, the bills they couldn't pay, the house on the verge of being taken away. They talked with lowered heads, voices trembling, as if fearing I might walk out again. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in their eyes, not the fear of losing money, but of losing the son they had never valued. Can you help us? My mother asked quietly. Her tone wasn't demanding anymore. It was pleading. I nodded calmly. I'll take care of everything. Their shoulders relaxed. Relief washed over their faces, but they didn't understand what my words truly meant. At least not yet. Over the next few weeks, I arranged doctors, financial advisors, and legal help. I paid off overdue bills, repaired broken rooms, stocked the kitchen, and restored order to their collapsing world. But I kept every interaction strictly professional. No emotional conversations, No calls outside what was necessary. No warmth, I was kind, but not close. I was helpful, but not theirs. They thanked me again and again, trying to bridge the silence between us. But I only responded with nods and measured sentences. It confused them, hurt them, made them finally feel the weight of distance. One evening, my father mustered the courage to say what I had waited years to hear. "We were wrong about you." My hands paused over the paperwork. I looked at him quietly. "You were always capable," he continued, voice thick with regret. "We just didn't see it. We weren't good parents. We failed you." My mother wiped a tear. "We know we hurt you. We know we don't deserve your kindness, but—" I stopped her gently with a raised hand. "You don't owe me apologies," I said, "and I don't owe you closeness." Their faces fell. "I'm helping you because it's the right thing to do," I continued, "not because I still belong here." Those words broke something in them. The silence that followed was heavier than all the years between us. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was simple. I gave them what they had given me: distance, politeness, a relationship without warmth. After everything was settled, I packed my bag again. When I stood at the door, they both watched with trembling eyes, waiting for me to say I'd return, that we were mended, that we were a family again. Instead, I simply said, "Take care," and walked away, this time by choice, not pain. The sweetest revenge wasn't destroying them. It was becoming someone they could never reach again.